Welcome back. Now, how does £1 million in your pension pot sound to you? Unachievable? Well, not necessarily. Aiming high, it's always a great mindset when it comes to your pension. So keep listening because we are going to hear exactly how some people do it.
I think if you want to go for the £1 million mark, you're probably going to have to save into your pension pretty aggressively, starting as early as you can.
By starting early, you have something to compound, because that's the thing about compounding. If you have nothing, it doesn't compound to anything.
If you think about £1 million, it sounds like a lot, but then an annual income of £40,000, when you've still got a mortgage to pay, you might still have dependents, that's not that much money.
I'm Philippa Lamb, and if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, why not click right now? You will never miss an episode that way. Now, as always, I have expert guests here to help me, including long-term friend of the podcast, Faith Archer. She's a financial expert and founder of Much More With Less, and importantly for this episode, a whiz with numbers. Damien Fahy, also back on the podcast, founder of Money to the Masses, a website helping millions of us take good care of our finances. And from PensionBee, brand new VP Personal Finance, Maike Currie. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Now, here's the usual disclaimer before we start. Please do remember, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or legal advice. And when investing, your capital is at risk. Now, I want to kick this off around the table by asking everyone, without naming names, do you know anyone who has £1 million in their pension pot?
Yes.
More than one person?
There's one in particular I'm thinking about. They were talking about how their pension pot was running into problems with the lifetime allowance.
So
there
you
go.
knew how much they had.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
was into
do
the
know
seven figures.
one, but it's not me, I'm going to say right now, but I do know someone. How about you two?
Someone personally I know is somebody who talks a lot about money, and that's the only reason I know that they've got more than £1 million in their pension pot.
Because they told you.
Because they regularly talk about it, and they want some guidance on my view on what's happening in the world. So it's really for their benefit that I know.
I know quite a few high earners, fund managers and the like, also in large part because they mentioned that they had the challenge with the lifetime allowance, but also a few ordinary people that have met that mark.
And PensionBee customers, Maike, I mean, presumably some of them have very big pension pots.
Well, interestingly enough, and taking into consideration that we now have almost 300,000 customers, just over the 285,000 mark, there are not that many pension millionaires in our customer base. If I had to put a figure on it, it's in the double digits.
Okay, so there's some.
There's some, far more with pension pots over £500,000.
But Faith, I mean, just to be clear, to get £1 million in your pension pot does not mean you have to contribute £1 million yourself.
No, it doesn't. One of the most important things is with pension planning is that you've potentially got time on your side. The earlier you can start, the more smaller contributions are going to add up. I think if you want to go for the £1 million mark, you're probably going to have to save into your pension pretty aggressively, starting as early as you can, and hope for a following wind from the stock market that the growth is going to take you through.
Yeah, okay. Well, should we put some numbers on it? I mean, if you were doing, as you say, and starting at, say, age 25, what sort of money would we be talking about in monthly contributions?
Okay, so let's put some assumptions out there. You're 25. We're going to assume that growth is 5% a year after fees, and you're running straight through 40 years to 65. So if you would probably need to pay £680 a month for that 40 years to hit the £1 million. However, I think most people, if you're starting at 25, you're not expected to have the same salary all the way through.
Of course, yeah.
So, if you can get pay rises and make sure that you increase your pension contributions as your pay goes up. So that same 25-year-old, if we were assuming that they've got pay rises, so they're increasing their pension contributions by 3% a year for the 40 years, and you've got the same 5% growth after fees, their contributions might be, you could start as low as £430 a month.
Okay.
And it would generate the £1 million by 65.
Obviously, if you start later, it's going to cost you more in monthly contributions. But then, I guess, if you start later, chances are you might have a bit of pension already saved up.
Absolutely. I mean, if you were going to start at 30 with no pension saved up, then rather than the 680 with the flat contributions at 25, then you're looking at kind of 900. You delay for another 10 years to your 40, then it's getting pretty hefty, like 1,700. So early you can start, and if you've already built up pension saving, so you're not starting from zero, but you're taking a more aggressive approach, the figures won't be quite so painful.
Hi, it's me, Philippa, just interrupting for a moment to say a big thanks to all of you who've subscribed to the Pension Confident podcast. Our mission is to help you feel more financially confident, and we are thrilled with the community we're growing here on YouTube. If you haven't already done it, hit that subscribe button right underneath this video so you never miss an episode. Meantime, enjoy the rest of this month's conversation. Damien, I know you've done a lot of work around this with parents helping their kids to get going on this. And actually, the first thing I'm thinking of is anyone who's listening to this with kids or grandkids, tell them to listen to the podcast and encourage them to start now. But what do you say to parents who want to help out?
Well, the thing is, it's about the time in the market. So if you have that ability to compound over time, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, as the figures that Faith has just said demonstrate. And we did a piece about how to make your child a millionaire, because we all get to a stage where in life you start to look at this £1 million number. And if you started early, or you started for your children, they have a much greater chance of becoming a millionaire on much lower numbers. So we looked at the numbers and crunched them. So let's say, for example, you had somebody who was 5 years old.
Okay.
And when we did this example, we were looking at putting it into a junior ISA. And if you assume growth rates that are slightly more punchy, let's say 8%, which is the higher of the FCA guidelines and the numbers in which they will allow people to project with.
Okay, so it is optimistic.
It's optimistic, but if you're investing for a very long time, we're talking about somebody from age 5 to 65.
Yeah.
And you can get to the point where for that person, if they have £56 a month put into a junior ISA to start with, which when they get to 18, it will become a stocks and shares ISA, which they take control of themselves as adults, then that amount of money will grow to £1 million over time.
That's a flat contribution
that
doesn't go up?
That's a flat contribution that doesn't go up. And so you can see by starting early, you have something to compound, because that's the thing about compounding. If you have nothing, it doesn't compound to anything. So you have to have some money. So the key thing is, if you start early for your children, I now do this. So I have junior ISAs for both of my children, and we put in the small amounts and they compound over time. That's the hope. And they will hopefully take the baton. We teach them, and they will continue this into the future. But the thing is, you can work it with pensions as well, because there are things called junior SIPs. So there are pensions you can contribute into for children, so they don't get access to the money at age 18, which is an incredible thing, because it means you can start them onto a pension very early.
And they can't blow the money when they leave home.
They can't blow the money. But the other thing I just want to add on that, if you increase the contributions each year by, let's say, 5%, then that £1 million becomes a much bigger number. So it ends up being closer to £2 million each year. You're just incrementally increasing the amount you put in each month. And that means you can therefore combat inflation. Because if you have a pot of £1 million in the future, so that child who I originally just started putting in £56 a month for, it compounded to £1 million by age 65. It, in reality, would only be worth around about £500,000 in today's money. So that's why it's important to keep increasing the amount that you put in.
Yeah, but there is quite an eye on it. There's such a, that is a relatively small amount, isn't it? £56 a month, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, that feels quite doable, doesn't it?
And when they get older, don't forget that a lot of the heavy lifting will be done by them when it comes to their own pension contributions. So that's the thing, the numbers that we've already mentioned are really big when you start later, and unfortunately most of us start focusing on our pensions when we're in our 40s.
Maike, this million, it sounds great. And as Damien has said, you have to think about, what is that really going to do for you when you're older? Because we're projecting decades ahead into the future. It sounds like a lot, but if you had £1 million in your pension pot right now, what would that give you in the way of annual income when you retired?
Well, if we base it on the standard 4% drawdown rate, that's going to give you £40,000 a year. Now, whether £40,000 is enough will differ from one person to the next, all depending on whether you've paid down the mortgage, what your standard of living is, what is important to you, do you have dependents, all those things will play a role. But really, if you think about £1 million, it sounds like a lot, but then an annual income of £40,000, when you've still got a mortgage to pay, you might still have dependents, that's not that much money.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is true, isn't it? So, Faith, can you explain just how we got to that 40,000 figure?
It's based on a kind of handy rule of thumb, the 4% rule, which is known as, I'm slightly put inverted commas around this, as the safe withdrawal rate.
Okay.
The idea that if you withdraw 4% from your pension pot, and in year one, the next year it's 4% plus inflation, and you keep doing that, your money will not run out over a 30-year retirement. And it's based on the Trinity study in the 1990s that looked back over American stock market performance, did it with lots of different withdrawal rates, and it came out and said, right, okay, 4%, you're going to be okay.
And it's really important, isn't it, particularly with longer lives?
Absolutely.
So, Maike, we're talking about, a £1 million pot. We're talking about an income of $40,000 a year. What sort of lifestyle would that give you?
Well, of course, it's a difficult one to answer because, there's no one size fits all. But a good benchmark, which is often referred to, is the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, which sets 3 different retirement lifestyles: minimum, moderate, and comfortable, which gives people a general indication of what kind of lifestyle they may be on track for in retirement. Now, the cash amounts for each standard are regularly updated. This is after tax, and it's also important to bear in mind that this assumes that you own your own home.
Okay.
Right. So for a single person, you'll need £13,400 per year for minimum retirement, £31,700 a year for a moderate retirement, and £43,900 per year for a comfortable retirement. So my deduction from that is if you're a single person and you want a comfortable retirement, you've got no dependents, you already need to pass that £1 million pension mark.
What about if we include the new state pension then? That helps a bit.
Yes, it does. But the one thing we need to bear in mind with the state pension is it all depends on how many years of national insurance contributions you pay. To get the full state pension, you need 35 years of national insurance contributions. And the reality is, especially for women, at some stage in our careers, we will take a career break, and that might impact how many years of national insurance we pay. So relying on that full state pension, not a lot of us will get the full state pension. That is a fact.
But you can make up the numbers, can't you? You can look up where your record is online and make up the numbers, or at least some of them.
So you can go online and you can get a state pension forecast. So people listen to this. It's a good, useful piece of admin to do.
Yeah.
To go and check your state pension to see if there are any gaps. And if there are, then you do have the ability to fill some of those gaps.
It is also worth saying that if you make sure that you register, you claim child benefit. If you have a career break because you're having children, you're not working, then you can get credits towards your national insurance contributions if you're looking after children under the age of 11. So, all is not lost if you if in state pension terms, if you take time off to raise children.
Yeah, but always worth thinking about, isn't it? Because when you're raising kids, life is busy. These are the things that slip through the gaps, aren't they? Then, of course, we come to inflation, don't we? As I've said before, we're talking about decades in the future. We're talking about big numbers. Damien, talk to us about inflation. If we're saying $1 million now, gives us 40,000. If we think about it in 10, 20, 30 years' time, it's not sounding like a big income, is it?
It's not, and that's the thing with inflation that people have to work out. So a good rule of thumb is that if you ever want to know how long it will take your money to double in value, then what you do is you take an interest rate and you divide it into the number 70. So you call it the rule of 70. Technically the rule is 72, but the numbers are easier if it's 70. So I'm going to be very simple and use a 10% rate of return. You wouldn't think I've got a maths degree. I stick to the simple examples. But so that would take you 7 years for your money to double. But conversely, you can use that same rule to work out how long it will take your money to halve in value. So if you start having a very high rate of inflation, then if you divide that number into 70, you can work out how many years it will take for your money to actually halve. And when we talk about halving, what people need to realise, that means that you aren't going to be able to buy as much with your money in the future.
This is buying power, isn't it?
It's buying power.
So it seems to be, we started off thinking £1 million was a crazy number, a huge number, and we've now got to a place where we're thinking you definitely want to aim at it if you can. Faith, shall we talk a bit about how to make those contributions a little less painful for people?
We've made the point about starting as early as you can.
Yeah.
That even small contributions, if you do it for long enough, are going to make a difference. But fundamentally, if you can increase those contributions over time, perhaps thinking, for example, of paying a percentage of your income into your pension rather than a flat sum of money. I think also taking advantage of any of the free money that gets added on top of pensions because you are bribed to save for your retirement.
Yes, the government bribes us. Tell us about that.
And that's how I think about it.
That's
It's
a
bribery.
great bribe.
Yeah. And it's a legal bribe.
Yeah.
So with pensions currently, if you pay money into a pension, you are not allowed to withdraw it until you reach the age of 55. That's rising to 57 from 2028. So in exchange, the government is willing to give you tax relief on top of your contributions.
This is a good thing, always really important thing to think about. If we think about that 25-year-old and the contributions you talked about earlier, can we apply that calculation to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got the 25-year-old, so their growth 5% a year, they're increasing their contribution by 3% a year, and so we'd so they need to start out at £430. Now, if you are a basic rate taxpayer, then the government, for every £80 you put in, you're going to get £20 added immediately in tax relief. So that's a really nice boost.
Yeah.
The other addition you can get is if you are an employee, then your boss will add money onto your pension.
Yes, I want to talk about workplace pensions in a bit.
If you've got a generous enough employer that they're doing matching, they will match your contributions, then for a £430 total pension contribution, if you put in 172, it gets topped up with another 43 in tax relief, and then your employer matches it, suddenly the employer's putting in 215. Suddenly that 430, the bit that's coming from you is just 172. That's then topped up with tax relief and then topped up with the employer contribution.
Which feels a bit less painful, doesn't it? And obviously, as you say, you're talking about a basic rate taxpayer, they're 25%, but you could be on a higher rate.
Absolutely. And if you are a high rate taxpayer, then you're going to get more tax relief. So whether you're paying high rate or additional rate tax, you put the same £80 in, you'll get the £20 added immediately in basic rate tax relief. But then if you're a high rate taxpayer, you can then claim back additional tax relief on your tax return, another £20. And if you're an additional rate taxpayer, you claim another £25. So that £80 as an additional rate taxpayer, that £80 you put in, you've got £20 immediately added, 25 back on your tax return. Is costing you a lot less than you originally thought.
Yeah, and the key point there is you do have to claim it. It doesn't come to you automatically.
Yeah.
Maike, you can check this on the PensionBee tax relief calculator, can't you?
Absolutely. So PensionBee is a brilliant calculator on its website, and you can play around with the numbers. But I actually want to tell you a story because I was 25 once and I was in a workplace pension and I was a basic rate taxpayer. And I went back and I checked on that pension. And I looked at the numbers, which was really interesting. The sum total of what I contributed at the time was £3,500, right? My employer at the time contributed £7,000, around double what I was contributing. But with the power of compound interest and, of course, the power with tax relief, which is that free money from the government. So if I put in £2,880 as a basic rate taxpayer, the government adds £720. So I looked at that pension, right? Now, bearing in mind the total contributions was £10,000, give or take, in total. That pension, which was not very aggressively invested, which was also a mistake I made when I was younger. I should have taken far more risk.
But we've talked about this on the podcast before, that whole risk profile when you're young. You can be a bit more
absolutely, because you've got time on your side. But that pension is now worth almost £60,000. Bearing in mind, I only put in £3,000 of my own money. And that really is the power of starting early. It's all about time. It's not about how much you invest, but about when you start. Time is the most powerful ingredient. And we spoke earlier about the power of making your child a pensions millionaire or an ISA millionaire. So it's really interesting because I wrote a piece for the Times this week, which is the power of junior pensions, junior SIPs, self-invested personal pensions.
Mentioned,
They are brilliant because, again, you can put some money into a junior SIP for your child, put in £2,880, that's all you do. The government tops it up with £720, and then you invest it in a relatively aggressive kind of high equity fund, so you get that growth. That investment, by the time your child reaches age 18, you could have around £115,000 in that junior SIP. Then, and here's the real kicker, you leave it. You don't put another pence into that pension. Your child reaches age 57, retirement age, and that pot could very well, the numbers that we crunched, shows that pension pot could be worth over £1.24 million. So that is a I'm not going to say easy because we know times are hard and budgets are tight, but putting some money away for your child from birth to age 18, and they've got the power of time, they've got time on their side, you could make them a pension millionaire even if you can't make yourself a pension millionaire.
Yeah, I mean, Damien is nodding. Yeah, this is what you're saying, isn't it? It's a great story.
It's a great story. And to add to that, I think pensions for children is almost something that isn't spoken about. It's almost like a secret that people don't realise.
That's true.
But I tell you the people who do know about it, and it's the people who do have million pensions. So pension millionaires do know about it. Because I can go back to when I was working in the city. People who were already maxing out their pension contributions and their ISA allowances were putting money, just as you described, into pensions for their children and their partners if they weren't working.
Were they?
Because they knew the power of the tax relief, the compounding, and they were actually sheltering some of their wealth as well. So,
but perfectly legally.
Perfectly legally.
Yeah.
And on the topic of sheltering your wealth, we know that inheritance tax is in the headlines. It's a very thorny issue because we know in 2 years' time, in April 2027, pensions will now be part of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. But if you gift money as a grandparent to your child into a junior pension, that is a very good way of reducing your inheritance tax liability. So grandparents putting some money into a junior SIP is a really good way. It's called gifting.
Faith, you talked about workplace pensions earlier. We talked about it a bit, but I'm thinking about our 25-year-old. If that person was younger at 20, you're not auto-enrolled at 20, are you, into workplace schemes? Is that right?
So in theory, you have to be 22. That's when auto-enrollment starts. You can potentially ask to join the pension younger than that. So at 22, at that point, you will be signed up for the pension. You put in 4% of your qualifying earnings. There's 1 percentage point added from the tax relief, and your employer will add 3%. So it comes to a total of 8%, and it is paid on qualifying earnings. So it's not starting at zero. It's earnings between £6,240 a year and £50,270 a year.
Okay. I mean, it's worth saying, that's the basic arrangement, isn't it? Some employers may be more generous than that.
Absolutely. And it is completely worth checking whether they are or not.
We talked about this in the podcast, and I've got to say, I never did that in my 20s. It never crossed my mind. But it's a really important thing to do, isn't it? Ask the question. If they're not saying to you how much they're going to contribute, ask them.
Ask them. And I can tell you a worse story than that. I worked in the pensions review for one of the major high street banks. I knew a lot about pensions, and I still wasn't engaging with my pension at that point. So it just shows you can be working in pensions and still not engaging with them.
And we briefly mentioned earlier the question of risk level, risk appetite when you're young. You don't necessarily need to be that conservative, do you?
And quite often with employers, they will put you into the default pension plan. So it's really important to look under the bonnet of your pension, your workplace pension, and decide, could I take a bit more risk? Do I need to be in the default? Because often the default also has higher fees. And fees, as we know, has a major impact on your returns over the long term.
Faith, we're talking about employed people here, and it is well worth remembering, of course, not everyone is employed. Self-employed people, freelancers, entrepreneurs, they're not getting those employers' contributions, are they?
They're not only not getting the employer contributions, but they don't benefit from auto-enrollment either. So if you are self-employed, you not only don't have the boss to pay money in, but you don't have a boss to set up a pension. You have to make the choice yourself. That can be, I think, quite an overwhelming choice. If your business is not pensions, what on earth do you pick? And I think my main tip is kind of almost progress, not perfection. Don't tear your hair out. Far better to pick a pension plan, set up the direct debit, get regular payments going in, knowing that if subsequently you change your mind, you can move the money.
So we've been talking about young people and how important it is to start young. Thinking about our 25-year-old again, or even, younger, 22, money is almost invariably tight. Unless you're extremely fortunate, you're not in a very high-paying job at that stage in your career. So where do they find this money? What sort of savings can they make? This is the avocado toast question that, poor Gen Z always get beaten over the head with wasting money on avocado toast and coffee. But do we have any thoughts on what they might do to find those few extra pounds a month?
I think it's like anything. The small contributions can add up. Maybe it's that £4 a day, £4 every working day, £20 a week, £80 a month. Suddenly, that can add up to a distinctly higher sum by the time you're hitting 65, 68. You're suddenly looking at tens of thousands of pounds.
So those small discretionary sums we spend every day?
Yes, but I also think a lot of financial guidance on that can be quite patronising, because it is those small items. I love to go to the station and buy my cup of coffee every morning, and I'm not going to stop buying that cup of coffee. It brings me great joy. And sometimes we need to look at the big ticket items too, and when we're talking about lump sums like a bonus or just spending less on something like a big wedding or a big trip abroad, that is a really good way to give your pension that boost, which is hard when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
But remember, as we said at the beginning, it's not how much you're putting in, it's about time. You've got time on your side.
You make a good point, though. As time goes on and we start spending money in bigger chunks on bigger things, cars, rental choices, that sort of thing, Damien, those choices, they can make quite a big difference.
They can make a difference, because no one's ever got rich, as far as I found out, by not eating avocado on toast or not getting coffee. It's about making the bigger ticket decisions. Now, one of the biggest ones I made was to not have a car on finance. So I used to have a car on finance, and for most people that is about £200 to £300 a month, okay, and you get caught in that cycle. But I broke that cycle, and now I don't have a car on finance, I just own the car outright. And by doing that, I've suddenly got a couple of £100 a month that I didn't have before, that I can then choose to do as I wish, which is being able to put it to one side. Then on top of that, try and avoid lifestyle creep. So let's have an example of somebody gets a pay rise and you think, I've got a pay rise, that's amazing, I'm going to go and blow it. Maybe put a portion of that or more of that into savings, investments or a pension, because you are still no worse off. You can be marginally better off if you keep some of that extra money you have a month and you use that on discretionary. We've got to have fun. But as long as it's planned for, then it's a plan, then that's fine.
Plan fun.
Plan for fun.
It doesn't sound so great, does it? I prefer a spontaneous fun now and again, but maybe that's just me.
The thing about what Damien said, there's an American book called The Millionaire Next Door.
Right.
And the author went out to kind of study who were all these kind of normal people that had amassed significant assets. And I think one of the phrases that stuck with me was that they'd had same car, same house, same wife. These kind of consistent things that were not expensive, and they'd kept their lifestyle.
This is the Warren Buffett argument, isn't it? The great investment guru.
Very much so.
A man who never spent any more than he had to, would it be fair to say?
He's a great example to bring up, because Warren Buffett he's arguably called the greatest investor of all time. But one of the things that Warren Buffett had is he invested from, I think it was the age of 10 or 11, and he's now in his 90s. So yes, he was amazing at investing and he put money in investments, but it was actually compounding. If you compound money for 80 years, you are going to be one of the richest people in the world. So it is one of the, again, going back to that point, it's about time.
Can we put some numbers around it? Because the pension calculator or PensionBee calculator will do that, won't it? If I put 10,000 in, what would it do for me?
Sure. So let's assume you're 20 and you put a £5,000 one-off lump sum into your pension. Now that could be worth £13,953 by the time you are 68. £10,000 could be £27,895. £20,000 could be £55,790. So if you're lucky enough to come into a lump sum, make that work hard. Put it into your pension, because you're also going to get that free money from the government in the form of tax relief.
Yeah, though it is important to remember there are limits, aren't there, on how much you can contribute.
Yes, that's an interesting one, and that's one to note. The annual allowance for the current tax year is up to £60,000 to still receive tax relief, but obviously for higher earners there is a tapered allowance, which could mean that you could put as little as £10,000 into your pension. And that is why it's not that easy to build that £1 million pension pot anymore.
You can't put more into your pension in any 1 year than you actually earn in that year.
Yes.
So assuming you inherited a huge amount of money, you couldn't throw it all at your pension pot.
Yeah, and you couldn't, if you earn less than £60,000 in that year, you couldn't even put the 60 in.
So it is all about consistent contributions, really, isn't it? This is the way to get to where we're talking about.
Absolutely. Set and forget. So set up that regular investment plan and just forget about it.
All right, so Maike says set and forget, which is a nice maxim to live by. Final tip from you, Faith?
I think don't give up on pensions just because you're not 20 anymore. Don't think you've missed the boat if you're in your 40s, if you're in your 50s, because fundamentally, for every, the £80 you put in, you're getting that £20 tax relief top up, plus extra if you're a higher or additional rate taxpayer. That is absolutely worth happening. It was absolutely worth putting contributions in later in life to get that tax relief to help boost your retirement savings.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Damien?
I want people to be optimistic, because even though some of these numbers seem huge, you do have levers to pull, like lowering your charges and things like that, that can make those contributions that you need to build a bigger pension pot that much lower.
So this is about engaging, the thing we were talking about earlier. Understand what your pension is doing.
If you've not engaged before, now's the time to start to engage in your pension.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is it for this time. If you're enjoying the series, please do rate and review us, because it really helps us reach more listeners like you. And if you missed an episode, as I always say, do not worry. You can catch up anytime on your favourite podcast app, YouTube, or of course, if you are a PensionBee customer, in the PensionBee app. Next month, we're going to be talking about the real cost of buy now, pay later. And later in the month, we'll be covering the autumn budget that we are all on tenterhooks about, so keep an eye on the feed for both of those. Here's a final reminder, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or legal advice. And when investing, of course, your capital is at risk. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.